Hi everyone and welcome to the Mad Creations Kitchen. Our most popular recipe by a long shot is the low carb bread. I have done quite a few videos now showing how to make it, and over the last couple of years I've changed it quite a bit. So I thought it was time to do an update. So this update is done today. It's the 28th of May 2020. For us in Australia, we're just a few days out of winter. I'm here in a short sleeve shirt, but it's a nice sunny day outside. It's still cold, but it's much nicer than we've had lately. So in making a bread with a yeast base, it is always harder to rise in the winter or in the cooler months. So it will be interesting to see how it goes, but what I want you to do is, when you're doing this part of the recipe, is give it the time to actually activate the yeast. Or if it does not activate, do it again. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a couple of cups of warm water. In today's video, I'm actually going to make two different loaves, because we are asked for lots of different substitutes in replacing some of the ingredients in there. So I'm going to do two different ones with one element just changed, just to show you probably one of our most frequently asked ingredients to be replaced in this recipe. So the recipe does include, like I said, it has a yeast base, which we actually activate the yeast with a product called inulin, which is a prebiotic. Inulin will actually activate yeast, as in making it foamy, so that it kickstarts the rise of the bread. You can substitute, where in this one I'm going to use a tablespoon of inulin. You can substitute a teaspoon, not a tablespoon, of honey or sugar, and that will activate the same quantity of yeast that we're about to use. And the yeast will actually eat the carbs that are within the sugar and the honey, so you won't have a problem. If you don't want to use those and you don't have inulin, then you're not going to have an activator, because if you have keto sweeteners at home like erythritol or xylitol, they do not work. Okay, so best thing to do is rush out and get some of this. You can either order it online, there's plenty of stores. iHerb's probably the biggest one internationally, and you can get it probably from most health food stores. But anyway, so we've got the yeast, which is just a dried baker's yeast. I've got a big one. We're in throughout the coronavirus times with panic buying, yeast disappeared from our supermarket, so I had to buy like a couple of big 500 gram bags. So it's just an instant yeast. So we're going to use those, and water. The other ingredients that are found in this bread is gluten flour, or vital wheat gluten flour. It does contain gluten. It's not good for celiacs. It does contain carbs, but it is stretched over the loaf. So gluten flour is used in a lot of wheat-based recipes and bread normally that is made for commercial use. So it is just where we've taken out the other wheat flour or plain flour or baker's flour and replaced it completely with that vital wheat gluten flour. Then the other product that is in it is oat fiber. That is not oat flour, so do not get the two confused. Oat fiber is 0 carb. Oat flour, on the other hand, high carb. So there is half a cup of oat fiber in this recipe. And again, that's available from iHerb internationally or some select stores throughout other countries. In Australia, it is at Elite Health Supplements, which you can get the links through the recipe as well. Now, it also is helping to create a bread that is like a real bread, but without the carbs. So it's actually helping to lower the carbs of the bread. Now, for Aussies, you can substitute Woolworths Macros Gentle Fiber. I have tried this. It will add carbs, roughly around an extra gram per slice. So you're going to be looking, rather than 1 gram of carbs per slice, we're looking at around 2 grams of carbs per slice. So just that little half a cup of that flour adds 20 extra carbs to the entire loaf. So that is quite a considerable change versus 0 carb for the oat fiber. The other ingredient that is the basic ingredient in here is golden flax meal, not to be confused with brown flax meal. The brown flax is a heavier, more bitter flaxseed or linseed, and golden flax is lighter in flavour. Now, I do recommend that the golden flax is milled when you go to do it, or blended again if you've already got it milled, and it should always be stored in the fridge after the packet is open because it can go rancid. So if you taste it and it tastes bad, throw it away and get a new one. If you've got one that's been kicking around in your pantry for a really long time, get rid of that too, okay? You want to have fresh flax meal, preferably freshly milled. I have a Thermomix, which makes my life a lot easier, so I just mill mine when I need it. And I will actually be doing that before the second part of this video because I've got none milled. But yes, that's what I use. So in today's video as well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute that golden flax meal because we do have some people that don't seem to like the flavour of flax. I love it personally. Hands down one of my favourite flavours. But I'm going to replace it today with a chia flour. I'm going to use a white chia seed and mill that myself to make it more of a white bread. But you can replace it with things like almond meal or almond flour, hemp flour. I again like to actually just mill my own hemp seeds and use that. It's just not as green as the hemp flours that you tend to buy. You can use pepita meal or sunflower or mix the two together. I'm looking at a packet past the camera right now of peanut flour. I haven't tried that yet. That might be the next one that I might want to give a whirl as well. Okay, so then you've got salt and you've got eggs. Now, for those who are vegan and don't want to put the eggs in it, you can leave them completely out. You could even put chia eggs in it if you wish, but the bread still works without the eggs as well. So there has been a lot of experimenting with this bread over the years. We've had so many people make it in so many different ways, and it is quite versatile. But the main thing is yes, that vital wheat gluten or the gluten flour is the reason this bread is high, and of course the yeast, and bread-like. So without that, if you're going to replace that with almond meal, for instance, and you don't want to have the gluten in there, then it's not going to be anything the same sort of bread. It's not going to be bread-like. This bread is probably the closest bread to bread that you will get on a low carb or keto diet. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to get this yeast starter up now. So I'm just going to get some warm water. So you don't want boiling water, you don't want hot water. You want tepid water or room temp. And you want a cup. So I don't want to confuse everybody, but because I'm doing two different ones. Out. Sorry, those are just water and they're the same size cups. That one is definitely more. One cup. The problem's in doing two at once. That's fine. Okay, so we've got our 2 cups of warm water. Now to that, in the original recipe, I had up to 4 teaspoons of yeast. It's totally unnecessary, and the yeast can actually add a more bitter flavour in that to the bread as well. So I'm going to just add 2 teaspoons of yeast to each of these cups of water. Now just bear in mind, I am doing 2 loaves here, so with the rest of the video, I'll have the other one already in the Thermomix and that, so I'm only going to show one from here on in. Anyway, and then we want a tablespoon of inulin. So as I said, if you're replacing the inulin with sugar or honey, and you can use any kinds of sugars, you want to only use 1 teaspoon. So here's 1 tablespoon. Oopsie. Into each of those. So I'm just going to give that a quick little mix. Now this bread can be made in a bread maker. Personally, I like to still activate the yeast beforehand, and I actually take out the second rising function in the bread maker. I have a Panasonic crusty bake bread maker. I'm looking at it, that's why I don't know why I need to look to it when I'm thinking about it. And it has a function where you can even take out the agitator in the bottom, and I actually do that after the first mix. So then when it goes to agitate, it actually won't break the rise of the bread. Because I don't, unlike normal bread, where you prove it twice, like you prove the dough and then you punch it out, give it a knead and then roll it into shape and then put it into your tin and prove it again. I don't do that with this recipe. I find that it actually makes the bread tougher, and not as airy, which seems weird because it does the complete opposite with doing it in a traditional sense. But yeah, for me, it's just, this is the easiest way, and it makes it quicker too. So, you know, you only have to stick it in the bread tin and leave it for an hour or so, depending on how long it takes to rise, and you've got your bread done. So what I'm going to do now is I've covered those both in cling film. I can already see the yeast is starting to activate, and I'm going to cover it in my silicone mat and a towel, which I'll pop on in a minute, and leave this for, you know, it could be 15 minutes, it could be 30 minutes, but I want to see foam. So essentially when you're activating your yeast, if you've got half a cup of water, the foam on the top of that surface should be almost the double. So if I do it normally in my cup, when I'm doing just one loaf, the foam line will actually go up to about the 2 cup line. So once that's ready, then I'll have it ready to be able to use in the bread. Now, if the yeast doesn't activate, don't just stick it in the bread and think it'll work, because you might actually have yeast that has passed its use by date. Like mine in the packet here now, I can't tell when that's going to be used by, but it's next year around the same time as now. So I know I will well and truly use that before then, because I bake a lot of stuff. But yeah, if you're going to make this bread and you've got some old yeast, definitely check it first before you get everything else ready, because it mightn't work, and you might need to go and get some fresh yeast. But like, when I say fresh yeast, I mean as in just instant one. It's just from the supermarket, cheap and easy to use. I haven't used fresh yeast, as in active yeast. If you have, let me know in the comments of the recipe. I'd love to know how much you used and how the bread went, and even some pictures. Okay, so that is, we're going to leave this for half an hour, and we're going to come back soon and mix up the bread dough and put it into our molds, and I'm going to show you some different sizes of the loaves and that as well today as well, and then we'll put it to let it proof for a while. Okay, so we'll come back very shortly. Okay, so we're back, and as you can see, the yeast has really risen. So what I'm going to do now, you can see it's all nice and foamy and good, is we're going to get our bread straight underway. So I'm going to do mine in the Thermomix today, but you can do this in any mixer or food processor. You can do it by hand in a bowl, but it will take a lot of work. You do need to knead the dough for about 5 minutes. The bread, when it comes together, is like really buttery, much like a brioche. I have increased the butter on the original recipe of this that I made back in 2017, but it's really tasty. So let's talk about the ingredients before we pop them in. So as I said, we've got the gluten flour, so Vital Wheat Gluten, that's Bob's Red Mill or Lotus. These are the 2 brands that I use. You can use any brands, but they're the brands that I've used with success. We have flaxseed going in. I've actually done the other bread already. So the flaxseed is in the other mix, and we're doing the chia seed, but for the flax seeds, I just get mine from Stony Creek and I buy it in bulk. It's an Australian brand. Here's the oat fiber that I was telling you about. This is the only one that I know that's available in Australia. You can get it from Elite Health, or you can get that from iHerb. I just use salt flakes. So when I'm measuring in salt, I use salt flakes. If you're using fine salt or table salt, reduce the amount of salt because it'll be a lot stronger. Butter. Recently I had somebody say the bread had no taste. It's because they used unsalted butter. So use salted butter. And in winter, or if you're going to be doing this by hand, make sure the butter's softened, because it'll probably be a little bit easier to mix through. With a Thermomix, it doesn't really matter. I just have mine in chunks. So when you're making the recipe, please do it in the order of the ingredients and the method, because there is a reason. Salt shouldn't go near the yeast starter. It's just like, that's like your bubble bath. You throw on your Epsom salts in your bubble bath or your bubble starter, right? So same with the bread flour. So eggs. We're using 2 free-range eggs. They're roughly around about 60 grams each, and they're at room temperature. I don't use refrigerated eggs. That gives you an eggy flavour with any of your low-carb or keto breads. And by using the room temperature, we get a nice rise on the bread. So I've got the eggs, then I'm going to put in my couple of pinches of salt. Salt actually helps leaven the bread as well, so it's certainly not something to miss out on. So then we've got 1 1/4 cups of the gluten flour. I was going to measure that for you too and tell you in grams, but it's in the recipe. 1/2 cup of the oat fiber. 2/3 of a cup of the chia seed that I've milled. You can see it's a little bit lighter in colour than the one that you buy that's in a flour form already. I have 75 grams of salted butter. And then onto the top, I'm just going to put my yeast starter. Scoop in all the foam. And then I'm going to mix that for 5 minutes on dough setting on a Thermomix or any thermal cookers. Otherwise, you're doing it like with a dough hook in your mixer or just in a food processor until it comes together, and then knead by hand. So dough, 5 minutes, and we'll come back when that's done so you don't have to listen to the noise. Okay, so our dough has just finished, and you're going to take it out. So for all the thermi users, you'll see just how easy it is to get this bread out. That's pretty much it. I'll take the blade out so you can actually see like how easy it is to come off the blades. So it's very buttery. It will feel slightly wet, I guess, from the butter, but it should not be sticky. So I guess that's the difference. There's wet and there's sticky. So you end up with this, dough that doesn't look like it's going to come together, but once you give it a little bit of a knead, I'm just using a silicone mat that I'm kneading on, but you can just knead straight onto your workbench. No flour or anything like that necessary. As per usual, Stormy is featuring in the video in the background. Dave is outside blowing and cleaning. We had somebody come around and just measure up for our new ducted air conditioning. Ours has gone on the fritz, so there's lots of noise everywhere, so we just have to do what we've got to do. But anyway, so I've just given that a quick knead. All I need now to do is, before I do that, I'm just going to grab a cloth, is make my bread tin choice. Now, traditionally most of you have actually always seen me make it in the 23 by 11 centimetre Master Pro, I think it's called, or Master Bake, crusty or crispy baked tin, right? So this gives you a short loaf, but a very high loaf. Now, for the same mixture, you can still stick it in like your American size, this is a USA pan, like a drum kind of pan. A big bucket one. Now I have done this exact mixture in this size. It didn't come up all the way to the top, but it did do a good effort at about 3/4 of the way. For this size tin, and I'll put the measures on the recipe, I would do 1.5 times to get a really big monster with that tin. Now, with the Mackey's 900 gram jumbo tin, this is a narrower tin. I think it's about 11 centimeters still. Might be even 10. Hang on. That's 11. Anyway, it's roughly around about 40 centimeters long, I think. You'll get a full loaf out of this one mixture. And what I do for that is I actually roll it into basically 6 buns, pop them in there, put the lid on, wrap it in the silicone mat and leave it for an hour until it's risen at least half the way. And then I put the lid on and I bake it with the lid on all the way through for the whole hour. And I get a really nice, perfectly square loaf as well. So today, for this one, I'm going to use this pan because I really want to photograph the bread shaped like that. So that's my choice. But yeah, you can use any pans. Like I get a lot of people asking for these and a lot of people rushed out and bought them. This does give you a crispier bake because it has air, so the air is able to circulate, or the heat's allowed to circulate around it with all the holes. Don't ever pour one like our Mad Creations Keto bread into one of these or it'll ooze out the holes because that's not a gluten-based bread. But with the tins, I do recommend not using a silicone tin. It's more about the conducting of heat. So the lighter the metal, the more conducting of heat too, so the more rise you'll get. I had a question about wood tins the other day. I do not know how they go. I know they're used for cakes, but I've never cooked in pine, so honestly I do not have any idea how that will go. Stormy, can you shut up? Anyway, I'm just going to roughly stretch out my dough to about the size of my tin, right? So the one thing with this bread is it really wants to bounce back into shape. So I've also had questions about, can I not use a tin and can I just do this onto, you know, like a damper or like straight onto a baking pan? Of course you can. So like, you know, you can roll this into rolls. You could do long rolls, short roll, like round rolls, pizza dough, like pizza bases, whatever you want. Okay, so I'm basically just gonna pop that in there. I try and make it a little bit even. That's how you're gonna get, like, if you bake your bread, sometimes like it's fatter at one end or whatever, it's probably because your dough wasn't evenly distributed, but you know, I don't really care. It's just for Dave and I anyway. So, okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna wrap that in the actual silicone mat, and I'm gonna put that in a warm place and allow it to rise, and I'm gonna settle that dog down during the meantime. And we'll come back and I'll just show you before I pop it into the oven. My oven is on, but I've got another loaf, so I'll show you what the other loaf looked like, the one with the flax seed, before I pop it in as well. But it's not quite ready either. It's, like I said, it's winter. Anyway, now just before I go, I think the only other thing I really got to cover, so we've gone through the tins, we've gone through the products, and I've actually even shown you what the products actually look like. In the original recipe, I used xanthan gum. Now, xanthan gum is used in a lot of gluten-free baking or keto baking because it actually helps create a gluten-like structure and a little bit of chew in baking, that is. That's not in like thickening and stuff like that. So originally this had, I think, a teaspoon in the mixture, and I just tried it without it and it really didn't need it. So I've taken it out. You can put it in if you want. It will stabilize the bread a little bit more. So if you've got problems with air pockets or whatever, try the xanthan gum. That might help you. But I don't actually have too much of a problem with the way I make my bread, and it rises and slices nicely every time. So for me, I'd rather save that for that ingredient for something else. And but the good thing is now you can find, well, I still get mine at iHerb, you can find the xanthan gum in most supermarkets. Okay, so we're going to pop that one into a little bit of sun through the window over there in a nice warm place, and let it rise above the tin before we pop it in the oven. Okay, so I'll come back after that has happened. Okay, so I just grabbed the flaxseed bread, and this is it here at a 26 by 13 centimeter tin. I just gave it a quick measure, and I'm going to pop that in the oven for 40 minutes, and then we'll come back and have a look and see how it is. Okay, so our flax meal bread is just fresh out of the oven now. It's still hot, just come out of the 25 centimeter USA pan. It has a lovely crust on it. Sounds nice and hollow, feels really lovely, smells just like bread. This one is one of my favourite breads with the golden flax meal. And I'm going to pop the chia one into the oven shortly, and we'll bake that. And when they're both cooled, I will show how they look when they're both cut, and give you a comparison on the taste as well. Okay, so I've just taken out the chia bread out of the oven, and it's still really hot. There. And we might just push that over there. So this was in the another USA pan that I got from Everton. You can see it's like got a really nice shape on the bottom of it. I cut some deep scores into the top of this one, and I sprinkled some sesame seeds over the top. It feels really nice and crusty. I don't know if you can hear that. I don't think you can. And you can see it's like a little bit longer than the other one. Probably a better way to look at it that way. So if I put them end to end, it's got a little bit of length, probably a little bit of extra width in that as well too. Didn't get a massive rise on this one, I will say. It's mainly because of, I think, the cold weather. But you know, it's still like, I'm still very happy with that. Like, this is a lot bigger. This is, yeah, hang on. The other one is like a 23 centimeter. This one was 26, I think. Have a quick check. Oh, sorry, it's a 30 centimeter pan. So that one's 7 centimeters longer than the normal, the short loaf that I normally do. So that would get you probably an extra 5 to 7 slices, depending on how thick you cut it. Either way, if you base it on a thin slice, it's only 1 gram. Even if you do a double one, it's only 2 grams net carbs per slice. But yeah, that's the one with the chia seeds, and this is the ones with the flax seed. I will cut them later. It's gotten late here at night. I've been juggling lots of things today and been out for a walk and just come back from grocery shopping, and I'll just do a quick video in the morning just to show you what it looks like all sliced up. So, but yeah, very happy, and that's just showing 2 different ways to make the bread very, very easily. And of course we included many of the different variations that you can use. I'll add a lot more to the post so that you can read through a lot of FAQs, so hopefully everyone can make the bread that they want the most. Anyway, thanks again, and I'll do that video in the morning just to show you the slice. So here I am again. I thought I'd get straight into it and show you actually what the bread looks like when it's sliced. This one is still hot. I will slice it while it's still hot, but I'm sure it'll be fine, even though I don't normally slice it when it's hot. So this is the flaxseed one. You can actually see like what it's like inside. This is the crust, so you can see it's nice and chewy, just like a normal bread. To slice the bread, I actually turn the bread on the side, and I like to use one of these really cheap knives. They're really great for cutting bread. So I've got like expensive ones, but this one hands down is the best one. And then I just like slice it just like this. So like I said, you might get a couple of little air holes, but that's nothing big. So as you can see, it's looking nice. So that is the flax bread. Now let's have a little look at the chia bread. So like I said, this one's still nice and crusty. And I can't turn this one on the side because it doesn't really have a side. But you can see the steam coming out of it. So I'll only cut a couple of the slices, but you can see it looks like just like bread. Really, compared to the two, you can't really see too much of a difference. That's just sesame seeds that's on there. But yeah, again, it's a really nice bread consistency. Smells amazing. I'm sure you'll be happy with either of these. And as I said before, you can substitute the golden flax meal with the chia flour or hemp flour, pepita meal or pepita flour, which is your sunflower, or not sunflower seeds, but you can use those as well. Your pumpkin seeds is pepitas. So yeah, this is a great alternative for bread for those who are following a low carb or keto lifestyle. It does contain gluten. However, if you can consume gluten, then it's still very low in carbs. So this one around 1 gram of carb, or both of them around 1 gram of net carbs per slice. So anyway, that's my updated video for May 2020, and I will put a lot of FAQs into the post so that everybody can have a good read through. And if you've got any other questions that I haven't covered, then please let me know and I'll continually update the post. Thanks again.